Welcome to the first of the Think for Europe series of television programs. Today's focus is on the reform of public administration. And to help us figure out the who, the what, the why, and the how, we have in the studio Majlinda Bregu from Tirana, the incoming Secretary General of the Regional Cooperation Council, then Simonida Kaczarska, the Director of the European Policy Institute in Skopje, and Milena Lazarevic, the Program Director of the European Policy Center in Belgrade. Welcome. Let's first figure out what exactly is public administration. When we say that word, what do we actually mean?
Well, public administration is basically what citizens use to get any business done with the government, with the state. This is
So
getting services.
An ID card or...
Yes, getting services done, getting documents which they need. So basically, any interaction with the state goes through the public administration, ideally.
And what is the state of public administration, and are the citizens happy with it?
Well, our research that we've done as part of the Weber project shows that the citizens are to a varying degree satisfied with the public administration. While we see reforms going on all over the region, there's still a lot of scope to actually move things forward. And what we've seen in our survey is that citizens do recognize the varying degrees across countries of the efforts that are being made. Because what we've seen, for example, in Albania and Kosovo, partly is a recognition of the efforts towards digitalization, easing of access to all of the public administration services, what was the case also in Serbia, yes. If Milena might have something to add on that. But on the other hand, there's a growing recognition of the need to make services and the public administration more accessible in all over the region with a lot of variations.
Let's clarify the project that you were working on, Milena.
Well, the Weber project is a project which is managed and conducted by the network of think tanks from across the Western Balkans. So we cover all the 6 countries of the Western Balkans. And with the support of the European Union and the Kingdom of the Netherlands, we have been monitoring and engaging, so firstly monitoring public administration reform from the civil society perspective, but also engaging with civil society organizations to build their capacities and their, let's say, skill set and tools to be able to participate in public administration reforms across the region. And the very rationale of the project is to build these local actors and local pressure which can continue to support these reforms once hopefully the countries join the European Union.
Reforms and changes are better if they go bottom up than the other way around.
Yes.
And you obviously selected the regional approach, which is something, Majlinda, that obviously appeals to you as the next Secretary General of the Regional Cooperation Council, whose job it is to sort of work on a regional scale. Why is the regional scale important?
Well, I think it's not only important because lately, during at least the last 2 decades, you are hearing more on the regional cooperation, especially after the devastating war in this region. But it is important because it is time now to build up the regional cooperation between countries in all the areas. Otherwise, we can't move ahead only by pleading and waiting from the European side, international and donors, if we are not going to speed up the cooperation among ourselves. And I think that this becomes of high importance in terms of trade as well, in terms of higher education and the level of speeding up the digitalization and the connectivity of people in the area, which I think was not really such a problem or such an issue some years ago. So the region was much more focused on building up peace, kind of reconciliation, which should still go. It's a long way. And now we are more thinking, or at least we should pay much more attention to how to improve the relations among us. So, and I'll cut on that. Somebody who has to fly from Tirana to Sarajevo, or from Belgrade to Sarajevo, it should go through Vienna, which I don't think it's really a good sign of regional cooperation. Or a businessman or connectivity, or a businessman who should move and pay some tariffs and border control documents from Kosovo should pay higher prices than that from, in exports I'm speaking, than that of Albania. So we need to find ways for that regional cooperation to really work. Yeah.
Now, this is regional cooperation within the domain of the civil society. And you two come from civil society organizations. Why is the civil society engaged in the public administration reform, which is the business of the state, after all?
Well, civil society has to be engaged in public administration reform because going back to what you mentioned before, it is the natural force which would provide bottom-up pressure for the public administration reform and for the services that we are ultimately getting from the state. Because civil society, and this has become a very vague and ephemeral term at times, is supposed to accumulate, to aggregate the demands of the citizens.
And be a kind of a watchdog as well?
And be a kind of a watchdog as well, to provide inputs from the grassroots level as to what are the needs actually from the citizens, but also from businesses, from employers associations, from syndicates, going a bit broader than the typical NGO speak that we tend to use. So from that perspective, civil society can be seen as the biggest user of public administration. So in this sense, there's a lot of functions that it performs. On the one hand, it is a user of the public administration, it has the watchdog function, but it's also there to remedy, to provide suggestions for remedies and recommendations as to how can we improve the services that the state provides in many levels and the support that the state provides as well, because it's not just services.
If I can just add there, I think that there is a very, let's say, very thin line and let's say balance which the civil society needs to create in its relationship with the government, with the state. On the one hand, yes, we need to be the controlling, to exert this controlling function. But on the other hand, the governments also, especially in our countries where there is a very low capacity, where the governments are still, let's say, facing problems with analytical capacity to analyze, to prepare legislation, to prepare policies, CSOs can be partners and they can provide help to the state. So it's a kind of a balancing approach for the civil society.
To what degree do you feel that you're accepted as civil society by the governments in the region as equal partners, yes or no?
I would say medium.
To a varying degree. It goes across, it's very different across regions, across countries. It's very different as to the political context at a certain point.
Even between the institutions.
Even between the institutions. Yeah. And in many cases, our research does show that it takes a very committed civil servant on the other side in any ministry to establish a very long-lasting relationship with civil society. But it's very ad hoc.
Mylinda, you come from the government. You will be working in transnational organizations. To what degree...
I come from politics, then government is part of that as well.
Yes, it is. To what degree do you find that the civil society in the region has been accepted as a partner who's relevant in the reforms which face the region, not just in the field of public administration, but overall?
Well, I should say that there is nothing wrong with governments or politics, but definitely the political commitment should be a good one. So, and then be on the positive side, and then transparency and to understand the need, not only it's not a desire in there, but to understand the need for other actors as well that might help governments and politics. That is really of high relevance and of high importance. So I do think that, and I'm pretty much, so I agree with what Milena said and Simonida, that then it depends not only on the institutions, but on the single persons as well. It's a kind of leadership style as well. So if you'd like to be transparent, if you'd like to be democratic, if you'd like to let's say, to increase the citizens' trust in the government as well and the institutions, you should use other actors.
Will you be as the next
civil society is one of those.
Will you, as the next Secretary General of the Regional Cooperation Council, consider the civil society as an important partner in what needs to be done in the region?
This question was posed to me even 2 months ahead, and I tend to believe that civil society will be very much positively aggressive in asking for its role to be enhanced in the regional cooperation. So I'm thinking, and I think that this is something really doable, to enhance the collaboration with the civil society and institutionalize the role of the civil society within the Regional Cooperation Council and not alone. Because there are more than 32 civil society organizations in the region, we should consider that there are not less than 50 important regional cooperation platforms. Okay, RCC is one of the biggest and let's say one amongst the most important of these platforms. So I do expect that for all the agenda that RCC covers, but even because on the process of European membership, European integration, of all of those flagships that the EU has set on us, that the role of the civil society is of high importance. not forgetting that they are not the sole actors in that. There is a
Absolutely.
business community in that, there is media as well. So I hope that will be an enhanced collaboration.
As Melinda said, in the Weber project, we organized and we established this platform of civil society organizations, which actually by now at the regional level gathers more than 130 organizations. Some working at the cross-border and the national level, and some working more at the local level. The Weber platform actually serves specifically to engage civil society organizations across the region in public administration reform dialogue, but not just between the civil society organizations themselves. Our whole rationale and the point of establishing this platform is precisely to ensure
reach out.
dialogue with the governments and with the regional institutions. And I must say that in the previous period we have established really good cooperation, both with the RCC and with the Regional School for Public Administration. So two important, with RESPA, yes, two important regional organizations in this area.
Now, you've been monitoring this reform of the public administration for the past year. What are sort of the main findings that you would like to share?
Well, we have had several surveys. We surveyed citizens, we surveyed civil servants, we surveyed also civil society organizations. And I can say that among the civil servants, perhaps the most surprising and the most interesting finding was that across the region, when asked if it's in their institution, one needs to have connections, political or personal connections to get a job, almost half of the respondents, almost half of the civil servants tend to agree.
And that surprised you?
Well, to be honest, I mean, we all expect such perceptions from the general public, but we didn't expect to find the civil servants themselves.
Okay.
Because that would kind of mean that they are agreeing and admitting that they themselves were also hired that way.
Bluntly speaking,
through
corrupt.
personal, yes, in a way. When we asked for the citizens, the most important findings were related to public service delivery, so delivery of public services. And one interesting thing was that only 1/3 of the citizens across the region believe that they have the opportunity to provide feedback and opinion on the quality of the services which they offer. And with the civil society perceptions, it is really difficult. Overall, we found that they are very, very negative. So I think that also among the civil society, sometimes I think we also need to work on seeing also the positive sides of things. But in general, civil society organizations tend to see and to feel that things are, for example, compared to the implementation of the legislation, freedom of access to information, that things are much, much bleaker than others see them.
Let's stick to the words citizens first, which is also the name of our television program, but also it is one of your mottos. Do the citizens actually come first, Milena, in your opinion?
Well,
are we going in that direction where citizens will be first?
The governments are definitely proclaiming, increasingly so, proclaiming in their policies, in their strategies, they're proclaiming that citizens come first, that their objectives are to create administrations which put citizens in the first place and which sort of look at the citizens as customers. However, implementation is still far from that. First of all, governments and even civil servants admit to that. Governments very often are so consumed by their daily activities that they forget who their primary customers are and what is the role of the taxpayer as someone who finances the work of the government. At the same time, I think that civil society organizations sometimes are so consumed by their relationship with the government that the civil society organizations also sometimes forget about the citizens. And this is why we somehow put this as a very, very strong part of the slogan of our project, to mind the reforms, but also to ensure that the citizens come first.
There's a wonderful expression coming from the United Kingdom called the civil service, which is another word for public administration, and people working in public administration are called civil servants, i.e. servants of the citizens. Is there a growing realization in our region that this is actually the case?
Of the civil servants, you mean?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I would say so. So in this region, we've seen all, but luckily, there are a lot of people with a lot of courage that would like to bring agendas forward. And then I would say that civil society has still a major role to play. So in regard to the regional cooperation, I think that all the actors together might rise that tide that could lift the boat of the regional cooperation. So it might be, it's not going to be too easy, but still what we face today in the role of the civil servants from one side, civil society, because it's not the same thing, so public administration, which still is at the level of a roller coaster in our region. So we see the public administration sometimes that goes better, and governments respecting all the meritocracy and public administration trying to build the professionalism from one side, and then on the other side we still have highly figures of people who believe that without being involved in politics you could not get a place in the public administration. But I still think that all those elements together might really consider and make a big change. So in terms of civil servants, I'd like to say that all the actors might serve for something good. On the other side, and I need to say it because that's my firm belief, EU on its part should raise the bar for the political commitment in the region. So it cannot continue only on the ideas of projects that you could do it better, only because the future is going to be brighter and so on. I've read a study lately which was really worrisome. So all the countries of the Western Balkans, in regard of EU, with the same level, the current level of employment and the development that we have, will need more than 200 years to converge and to catch up with EU. So this is really worrisome figure. And that's why the efforts should be all in there together. If we would like that future that has arrived to be distributed.
If I can just add one thing, I mean, and I think Mylinda here came again to the very essence of why we as civil society are doing this work towards the public administration and engaging with the public administration. In order to converge, in order to catch up, the state needs to create conditions for the society and for the businesses to grow, for the businesses to do what they're supposed to do. On the other hand...
cut the red tape amongst other things.
Exactly. Cut the red tape as one of the things. On the other hand, the state and the government has limited resources. In the civil society, there is a huge human potential, huge human capacity, which actually can supplement and help our states.
Universities as well, because we forgot.
Yes, exactly. And they are also media universities. I mean, these are all extremely important forces in the society, which if they put their heads together, rather than always seeing each other as enemies, our countries could progress much better. But of course, I mean, there needs to be a fundamental feeling of trust between the governments and the civil society.
And we're still not there yet.
And in some countries, I think we are making good progress. I would say that Macedonia is probably one of the countries now where this trust in the society is getting higher. But in some other countries, and I would have to say that, for example, right now in Serbia, in Montenegro, this is not the case. We have deep distrust.
Can I just add? I mean, it's not. I would not just say it's a level of trust, but it's also a level of shift in the entire way that we make policies. Because in order to get all of these actors together and to use their capacities, one has to have a very predictable policy cycle, for which we talk about in our project a lot for the last 3 years. And for this predictable policy cycle, civil society needs to be able to prepare and to be consulted early on in the process rather than just to be added as an appendix at the end of it.
Right, let's look back at your study. Are there any specific recommendations? You'll continue the monitoring, of course, but are there any specific recommendations which will be some kind of a reference when you do the monitoring in, let's say, a year's time?
Well, recommendations will come very specifically at the national level, but we do have some key messages, I would say, at this point. First among them is that governments, as Simonida just said, need to include and consult the civil society and the public early on, when they start developing their policy documents, strategies, legislation. Because if we get consulted just on the color of the cherry on the top of the cake, that is not the point. We want to be...
Cherry is usually red anyway.
Yes, or whether it's going to be a cherry or something else. But in any case, I mean, if we get consulted when the cherry is supposed to be put on the top of the cake, we cannot say, but listen, guys, I mean, we don't want...
That's not genuine participation then.
That's not genuine participation, and we cannot really influence the contents of of the policy. This engagement needs to come early on in the policy processes, and this is the way that civil society can actually really contribute, because civil society doesn't have great legal experts who are going to say whether this provision of the law should be stated this or that way. They have people who know the situation on the ground, who have data, and who can actually contribute to the design of the policy, rather than just, this very, very fine legal language.
But it hasn't been a traditional norm, especially in our countries, to be so open and transparent. And it seems that it's like, so governments sometimes and politicians think that it's their own shop, and if they would like to preserve the secrecy, they could speed up things and do things better, so that it hasn't been...
Yes, but then if we look ahead of all of our countries, there's major reforms, overhauls of taxation systems, social security systems that are on the way. And what I had in mind, and going back to what Milena said, these are processes that take time, that need to be announced beforehand. Going back to your UK example, if you do an overhaul of the social security system, then you do it for 5 years at least, or you consult for 2 rather than do it at the end. So that's the logic of it.
And talking about time, we're just about to run out of time. What did we not mention that absolutely needs to be mentioned? Can we start from this side and then go from right to left?
Wonderful. What we did not mention in terms of regional cooperation is that the whole logic of European integration at the end of the day is based on regional integration. So if we see ourselves in 20, 30 years, or maybe very optimistically in 10, in the European Union, then this region will be a region of the European Union, which will have a common joint economy and which will depend on the ties that are established here on its success in building its role in Europe.
Milena?
I will just go back to the very basic logic of the Weber project. We really believe, and I think we will continue to work that way in the years to come, that if we want to ensure that the same kind of impetus and pressure for reforms of rule of law, good governance, all the crucial areas, if we want them to continue once our countries hopefully become members of the European Union, when the hard EU conditionality will no longer be there, we need to create strong, vibrant, capable civil society. We need local actors who are going to be there and who are going to keep the momentum for these reforms once we are not constantly conditioned by the European Commission and the EU member states.
Once we start implementing what we permanently say, which is we're doing the reforms in order to better our societies, not necessarily because it's a part of the EU road. Melinda?
The last words, I would say that we really need an adequate coordination of all the actors involved in the area of the regional cooperation. And the last one, but not the least, is communication should be taken very seriously. And we've discussed on that a lot. Few citizens, and that is not my concept, but data coming from all the surveys in the region, are really, they don't really feel attached to the initiatives that of regional cooperation and all the reforms that the region is going through. So I think that element as well should be taken very seriously.
Simonida Kaczarska, Milena Lazarević, Melinda Bregu, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.